Today, we're diving deep into a really comprehensive new policy agenda proposed for the United States. This is a plan that kicks off in 2025 and, honestly, it outlines some major changes that could have huge implications for just about everyone.
So this is the big question we're tackling, right? What does all this actually mean for the economy, for the nation's borders, and for America's role on the world stage? Let's dig into the details of the proposals and see what we can find.
All right, so here's our game plan. First, we're going to break down the new tax landscape. Then, we'll pivot to a pretty dramatic reshaping of global trade. After that, we'll bring it back home to look at the budget, borders, and what's happening in the states. And finally, we'll zoom out and take a look at the political horizon for 2026. First up, taxes. This is where the rubber meets the road for a lot of us, right? These are the proposals that could directly impact what's in your wallet, whether you're an individual taxpayer or running a business.
The tax strategy here is, well, it's a real balancing act. On one side of the coin, you have these significant tax cuts for people and businesses. But on the other side, the plan looks to raise revenue by tightening certain rules and capping some really popular deductions, like the one for state and local taxes.
And to really get a sense of the scale we're talking about, just look at this number. We're talking $2.193 trillion. That's the projected price tag for just one of the proposals, making the 2017 individual tax cuts permanent. So this isn't just some minor adjustment. This is really the financial cornerstone of the whole agenda.
And it goes way beyond that one big tax cut. The proposals are incredibly broad. They touch everyone from service workers with a new idea for tax-free tips, all the way to business owners and families who might get these new tax-advantaged savings accounts. The goal here is clearly a fundamental reshaping of the entire tax code.
Okay, so we've looked at what's happening in our wallets here at home. Now the agenda pivots, and it pivots big onto the global stage. The second pillar is all about a fundamental shift in how the U.S. approaches global trade.
This quote right here, it really gets to the heart of the philosophy. The core idea is that having a good job at home is way more valuable than being able to buy the cheapest possible products from overseas. It's presenting a direct trade-off. Let's prioritize the domestic economy, even if that means consumer goods might cost a bit more.
So why the big shift? What's the thinking behind it? Well, the document points to decades of job losses. We're talking 5 million lost manufacturing positions and what it calls unfair trade practices from other countries. The argument is that tariffs are a necessary tool to reclaim some economic sovereignty and protect industries that are critical to the U.S.
And you can see that strategy in action right here in these new trade frameworks. A pretty clear pattern starts to emerge. The U.S. uses tariffs as leverage, like that 10% reciprocal tariff for the U.K., to lock in very specific wins, like billions in new exports or these massive energy deals with the EU. It's a very transactional, tit-for-tat approach to trade policy.
So how do they actually do all this? It really boils down to two key legislative tools. Think of them as the muscle behind the SST's strategy. Section 301 lets the U.S. retaliate against what it considers unfair trade. And Section 232 allows for tariffs based on national security, which is a really powerful authority that's already being used for steel and aluminum.
Okay, so from the global stage, let's bring the focus back home. We've covered taxes and trade, so now for our third section, we're going to look at the domestic front, the federal budget, the nation's borders, and what's happening at the state level.
First up on the budget, we have this thing called a rescission bill. It's a pretty powerful tool. It basically lets a president propose canceling spending that Congress has already given the green light to. And the document notes a recent $9.4 billion bill was signed, with the vast majority of those cuts, over $8 billion, coming straight out of foreign aid programs.
Now, shifting gears to the border, just look at this contrast. 6,177. According to the data presented, that was the number of monthly border apprehensions in the summer of 2025. That's a massive drop from a peak of nearly 250,000 back in late 2023.
And a central piece of this story is the controversial detention center, nicknamed Alligator Alcatraz. This timeline shows the recent legal seesaw it's been on. In July, it was holding over 300 people. Then in August, a judge ordered it shut down over environmental concerns. But by September, an appeals court hit pause on that order, letting it reopen while the legal fights continue.
But it's not just about one facility. The policy details huge legal and financial shifts across the board. It earmarks over $150 billion just for enforcement. At the same time, it makes these major changes to the system itself, things like restricting benefits, hiking application fees, and giving judges new powers to dismiss asylum cases much more quickly.
All right, for our final section, let's try to connect all these policy dots to the political world. How does all this activity translate to the political landscape? We'll look at the data presented in the source material to get a glimpse of the outlook for 2026.
When you start looking ahead to 2026, you've got to start with voter registration. And the data here shows the Democratic Party's lead has shrunk, and shrunk pretty significantly, falling from an 11-point advantage in 2020 to just over 6 points by 2024.
And it seems to go beyond just the registration numbers. This polling data from the Wall Street Journal points to a broader challenge. It says 63% of voters hold an unfavorable view of the Democratic Party, which the source notes is the highest that number has been in their polls going all the way back to 1990.
So what's driving this shift? Well, the numbers tell a pretty clear story. You're seeing a net swing of about 4.5 million voters between the parties in just 4 years, and the losses for Democrats appear to be concentrated in key states and among really crucial demographics like younger voters and Latinos. And on top of those voter trends, you also have state-level strategies at play that are shaping the political map. In Florida, for example, a redistricting effort is underway in the middle of the census cycle, and the projection is that this will likely create 2 additional Republican seats in Congress. So when you step back and look at the whole picture, it's a massive, interconnected vision, isn't it? A completely remade tax code, a much more protectionist trade policy, and a really hard-line approach to domestic enforcement. All these pieces are designed to work together. So the question this leaves us with is, how will all of these changes combine to actually shape America's future?